Author event: Linda Solomon, The Queen Next Door, Aretha Franklin, An Intimate Portrait.
So how did you get into photography originally? I'm just so curious.
You know, Martin, it's interesting. I was always the kid with the camera. My parents gave me a camera as a birthday gift when I was just 5 years old, and I realized even at that age that it was so much fun. I could share feelings and capture my sister and friends, and always loved it. And I always tell families that a camera is a much better investment than a toy because you continue to grow with it. You don't grow tired of it. And it was just a life changing gift. But there was another gift that to me gave me the confidence to pursue it as a profession. And I was 13, and my dad gave me this very sophisticated book with my name engraved in gold, and it turned out to be a photo album. So that was the gift that really changed my life because it showed that my parents respected my photography. And I placed the photos in an album, and I still have that album. It's still on in my library. And when I was doing this book, I realized the importance of printing. So often today we just share photographs. And when you print a photograph and you put it in an album, your memories and your history come right back. And there were so many experiences with Aretha that happened close to 40 years ago. And if I hadn't printed those photos, of course, they were photographed on film and I had my negatives, but all my memory of all those experiences came right back. So I always encourage people, don't just share, print the photographs so that 30 and 40 years from now, you will have those memories right where they back with you.
Why did you pursue having a career doing celebrity photography?
Well, growing up in Detroit, it was just natural.
Yeah.
You know, we had access to see the Four Tops and the Temptations and Supremes at the state fair. And my parents used to take us to the state fair every summer, and I would wait and get autographs. And also, I could go down to the record stores in Detroit and wait in line and meet all the great Motown stars. Aretha at that time was living in New York. So I never had the opportunity to photograph Aretha as a child, but I did have the opportunity to photograph a lot of the Motown stars.
What places, like Hudson's downtown?
Well, at the record stores downtown. So I would take the
Okay.
bus. We lived off of 8 Mile in Detroit. I would take the bus downtown on Saturday with my friends, and we would wait for autographs, and the Four Tops would sign everything, and it was just so much fun, and everybody was so nice. I mean, they were terrific, and they weren't that much older, you know. I mean, I'll never forget the first time I met Mary Wilson, and she said, "Linda, I'm not that much older than you," but yet, you know, her career, she was a huge star at 18. So having the opportunity to meet her was just the biggest thrill, meeting the Supremes. Love them.
We'll jump into your book, but I
Sure.
guess when you are in shooting pictures of a celebrity, how do you get that moment? So when people when they get in front of a camera freeze
Well,
up and they don't want to, they're nervous. Like
Well,
what's your
the
knack?
secret to it.
Yeah,
Well,
what's the
I
secret
think
to
that I
it?
brought this photo as an example. I like to shoot candidly. I really believe that's the most natural way to photograph someone, to shoot candidly. I don't like posing people. It never has been my style to use artificial light. I even had the lights dimmed in here. My husband will tell you I'm kind of crazy when it comes to natural light. I love photographing people only with natural available light. So that photo was taken in a studio. They were Aretha and the Motown stars were actually together to do a promo for Mary Young, and that was taken in the studio. But behind her, well, Levi Stubbs was in that particular setting, and Billy Henderson of the Spinners, and Martha Reeves was also there that night too. But this is just a candid shot. Aretha was looking at the script, and as they recorded a campaign song, they all volunteered to do it. But I just love to kind of shoot, you know, things as they happen. I don't like to change environments. I don't like to alter someone, and I don't like to add any artificial lighting. So I like to just document rather than, you know, pose someone.
Do you remember the first time you ever met Aretha Franklin?
I do, I'll never forget it because I had heard a promo that she was going to be on Kelly and Company. Do any of you remember Kelly and Company? It was a local talk show on Channel 7.
Yeah,
Very
yeah.
popular show where every celebrity that came to Detroit would appear on Kelly and Company. So I heard a promo that Aretha was going to be on, and I had a column in the Detroit News. And I called one of the producers and I said, "Do you think I could come down and meet Aretha and do a story on her?" And the producer said, "Well, I don't know, you can try." So I waited outside. And as she pulled up in her limo, I introduced myself and I said, "Miss Franklin, thank you so much for coming home. I just love you, and I've always wanted to meet you, and I have a column in the news. Would you mind if I take one photograph?" And she looked at me and she said, "That's fine." And then as we were walking in, as most photographers will do, I said, "Would you mind if I just take two more?" and I was true to my word. Only did take 3 photographs. But she was playing the piano, and there was nothing more magical than seeing Aretha accompany herself. So I had the opportunity in my first experience meeting Aretha Franklin to photograph her playing piano, and it was just magical. And the audience was about this size. It was a very small studio audience, and I was this close to her. And I published one of the photographs in my column. And then shortly after, I received a message at the Detroit News on one of those old-fashioned pink slips that, while you were out.
Yeah,
And
right.
it said Aretha called, and by the way, they misspelled her name. And
Uh-huh.
I saved it because I thought, Aretha Franklin called me. And, I was stunned. And so I saved the pink slip. I was thinking of putting it in the book, but I didn't. And because her name was misspelled, I didn't want to embarrass an editor at the Detroit News. But when I received the message, it was to come to an event at Mary Young's that she was doing to talk about a benefit for her father's medical trust fund. Aretha came back to Detroit because her father tragically had been shot and he was in a coma, and she came back in 1982 to be with her family, and of course pray for her father's recovery, and sadly he did not. And that's when I met her. And she appeared very different, I will say. When she walked out of the limo, she was wearing eyeglasses. That was the only time I ever saw Aretha wear eyeglasses. And she almost appeared, I don't know if shy would be the correct way to describe her personality, but she was quiet. And there, you can imagine the sadness of going through what she was going through. And she was just a little bit different, in many ways from the Aretha that I got to know later on. And so I observed her. I was 29 when I met her. She was 40. So I observed her very closely, and as most photojournalists would, and I found out early on how much family meant to her, because at that second occasion with her, she brought her sisters. She was with her brother, Reverend Cecil Franklin, Earlene Franklin, his wife, and their daughter, Crystal. And Esther Gordy Edwards was there as well, but it was a very small reception. And there were probably 10 people. But she brought her entire family with her, and I got to meet them. And that was the assignment. I was on assignment because I did a story. But that was really what changed our relationship because of her family. I am telling you, they were the sweetest, nicest people. They embraced me like I was a member of the family. I've never felt anything like it. I mean, her sister Irma was just so warm and so loving and so sweet. And I did another story, and I put photos, of course, of her family in the paper. And Aretha sent me flowers. And she signed a thank you from Aretha and the Franklin family. And that's what started everything.
Was this book well in the planning stages before Aretha passed away?
Not at all.
Not at all.
No, because I wanted her to live forever. Often you hear about journalists doing, preparing for someone's passing. I didn't even have my photos printed when she passed away. That I was asked to be on CNN, and I was live on the phone with CNN internationally from my photo lab because I didn't even have the photos printed. I had some printed, but not the photos that people wanted to see and talk about. So I never thought of doing a book. I was interviewed by Tom Joyner after Aretha had passed away, and I started telling him about some of the experiences, being able to photograph her at her birthday parties, Christmas parties, having I shouldn't say it, in Ann Arbor, the Michigan State University cheerleading squad, especially this weekend.
Yeah, right.
You know, come to her home to cheer her son. So he said, "You need to do a book. Get that book out here." So I thought, wow, maybe I should. And that's how it all happened.
And how many images did you have of her? Was there a ton of editing in terms? You must have,
Yeah.
because you shot tons of
Well-
events, private ones at home, concerts.
You know, when you say a ton of editing, I think the editing really was up to Wayne State University Press. But surprisingly, even though I covered many events with her, I didn't shoot a ton. You see, I felt the way to really, I guess, have her continue to invite me was to just not be intrusive. So I would just take a few photographs and then walk away. So for example, you know, when I did the Christmas party, first Christmas party with her, I didn't want to disturb her. And I think when you shoot film, which I was shooting, you're much more thoughtful. You know, you take your time to really get it right. You don't think, well, I'll change it in Photoshop. So often photographers, I've heard them say that, and I think, no, you should really do it right while you're shooting.
Yeah.
So I would, you know, take my time to really get what I felt captured the event, and then I would let her enjoy it. So I was never in her face with my camera. So if you look back, maybe I would shoot one roll of film, which would be 36 photographs. That would be it. And when I was doing the book, Martin, at times I would say, why didn't I just take one more picture? But then I thought, no, because she wouldn't have liked that. So, you know, to just be more, of, you know, of an observer and just capture what I needed and then let her, you know, not feel that there was somebody there, you know, and keep taking loads of photographs.
I don't know if everyone knows that once Aretha came back to Detroit to live in the Detroit area, she did not like to travel much at all. She wouldn't fly,
No.
basically at all. That was a lifelong thing, basically.
Oh,
or-
she wasn't flying, but not only wasn't she flying, during those years in the 80s, she didn't leave Detroit. She did everything in Detroit. She wasn't doing concerts anywhere other than Detroit. All of her music videos were in Detroit. All of her great specials she did. And this was a huge turning point in her career, the mid 80s. You
Right.
remember this was Who's Zooming Who,
Freeway of Love.
Jumping Jack Flash. I mean, this was
Gigantic.
a huge turning point, and she didn't leave Detroit. So anyone who wanted to record with Aretha had to come back to Detroit. So I always look at it this way, and tell me what you think. You know, after Motown left, Aretha really brought the music industry back in the 80s because she was hiring musicians, florists, caterers. She was doing all of these incredible recordings in Detroit at United Sound and other studios. So she brought the music industry back in the 80s. And I don't know if that's really been talked about. But having experienced all of these wonderful events with her, I mean, when she received her AMA awards, she did it out of Detroit via satellite. She did not go to Los Angeles. So everybody had to come to Detroit. She did it from the Premier Center, which is long gone. But she went live from the Premier Center, and she let me stand right backstage with her. So there was an example when I said, I wish I had shot a little more, because when I look back at the photo of her, it's one of my favorite photos in the book. She's in a sequin mini. She looks gorgeous, barefoot, and she's got her, you know, finger up to her ear, her IFB, waiting to go live on the American Music Awards, and she looks fabulous. But there was a telegram on the table, and I often, you know, would think, oh, why didn't I shoot closer? I wish I knew who that was from. But that wouldn't have been me. I just wasn't like that.
You've got to, talking about United Sound, that's some of my favorite pictures in the book.
Oh.
When Keith Richards and Ron Wood came to Detroit to record with Aretha Franklin at United Sound Studios. United Sound is still there. They're going to apparently have to move it because they're widening I-94. It's just off of 94 and what is it, 2nd or 3rd?
Yes.
It's just off of Woodward Avenue. But this legendary recording studio where, I mean, tons of people, I mean, I think going back to
Jackie Wilson, everybody.
John Lang Hooker, I think,
Yes.
recorded there. So, talk about that day when Keith and Ronnie came to town to record with Aretha.
And how she looked. Well, first of all,
Yeah, and
Aretha
how
was
she
always
looked.
very conservative and looked like like this
Yeah,
photo.
pearls. Yeah.
So when she called me, she said, Linda, or it might have been Cecil, but because her brother would call me and say, you got to be down at 10 o'clock, and we can't tell you too much. So just be there. I said, I'll be there. But when the Rolling Stones came to town, she said, Linda, I'm changing my entire look. And when she walked out of the limo, there was a photo that we didn't use in the book. We can hold it up, but she had a completely different look. She was now a punker. So can you imagine seeing Aretha Franklin with purple hair and that wild outfit? And I have a photo of her getting out of the limo, and she has this huge smile on her face, like, look at me, because it was such a different image for her. But the funniest thing was Whoopi Goldberg, because Whoopi, was a huge star, of course, and I was waiting for her to arrive, and she arrived in the back of a station wagon, but covered in blankets. And I thought, what is that about? I mean, totally covered. So I didn't take that shot because I could tell she wouldn't have liked that. So I waited as she was walking in. So the shots are just candid shots when I was right there when Keith Richards and Ronnie Wood arrived. And but seeing Aretha look like that, I mean, it was so much fun. I mean, it was such a different image, and it was she really had fun with it. And and she just let me shoot the rehearsal. She always let me shoot the rehearsals, which I liked better than the actual performance, because it was they were so much more relaxed and candid.
Can I tell you about my Aretha Franklin experience
Yes.
at Baker's Keyboard Lounge?
Oh,
Which is
yes.
mind blowing. When I saw Aretha at Orchestra Hall, probably in the mid 1990s or so, maybe a little bit after that, and it was utterly mind blowing. How could it not be?
Was that with the symphony?
Yeah, with the symphony.
Well, that was in back
Yeah,
back
yeah.
in
But it was, I think, a little bit before then that the Detroit-born saxophonist James Carter was recording a live album at Baker's Keyboard Lounge, which is the legendary jazz club on Livernois and 8 Mile in Detroit, and which is really a pretty small venue. And I was working at WDET at that time and managed to get on the guest list to be there for the taping, and I was literally. The stage was where your bag is. I mean, literally, it was that close. And over in the corner where you are was Ahmet Ertegun, the founder of Atlantic Records, who flew in to Detroit to supervise the live recording. They had the big mobile truck outside with all the wires and the microphones. Seated right here was Anita Baker, right next to me, and we're just chatting way high. And you're Anita Baker. How are you? And when about the time that Aretha came on to be a guest, I think she sang 2 songs, 3 songs, and suddenly this was in, I believe, like late spring or summer, and suddenly the air conditioning was turned off, and it became sweltering inside there, and I didn't realize what was going on at the time. So we're all going, God, what's going on? It's like really broiling in here. But that's
what she liked.
That's what she liked.
Yeah.
She didn't want air conditioning on because it affected her voice,
Right.
which I found out later. She came on it was just jaw-dropping, astounding, her performances. And I thought, I can't wait until this album comes out because, of course, they're going to use all of her songs that she sang. Not one showed up on the album.
Really?
Not one. It's a really good live James Carter album, but doesn't have Aretha on it. And I assume that Aretha said there's something I don't like about my performance that night. But it was one of those, I was there.
Wow.
One of those
But
moments.
you didn't have a camera.
I didn't know that. No, I didn't.
Well, see,
no,
so
no
that's
camera.
what's interesting about the book. And a young intern at Metro Times called me this summer and said something to me that really meant a lot. And she said, "May I meet you for lunch?" And she's only 19 years
From
old.
Metro Times, yeah.
Yes, and she said, I've been looking through the galleys of your book, and I have to tell you, a book like this could never happen again. And I said, well, why is that? And she said, because everyone who is famous today, they've already posted it on Instagram. They've already had all their friends post. They've already put everything out there on Facebook, even before a concert is over. So when you were doing all of these events with Aretha, no one had a cell phone. In fact, I show a photograph of Levi Stubbs with a vintage movie camera. But no one would think of bringing a camera to Aretha Franklin's home back then. Nor would you think of asking to do a selfie. So, lately I've been getting a lot of publicity with the book, and people will say to me, "Where are your photos with Aretha?" I said, "I only have two," because it just wouldn't have been appropriate for me to say, "Let's take a photo together, let's do a selfie." You just didn't do that.
Yeah.
And even though we became friends, I still wouldn't have done that. So I only have two photos, and they're very old. So people say, "Well, you're using a photo that's 100 years old." Well, that's the only photo I have. So, it was a different time, so no one had a camera, when I would go to these events, and even if they did, they wouldn't have had the nerve to take it out and start taking photos at her private Christmas parties, like you would today, where everyone would be taking
Yeah,
photos
taking
with their
photos and
phones.
selfies. Yeah. Take us into one of these Christmas parties I'm looking at from December of 1987. Christmas at Home. These are just some of my also, besides the Ronnie and Keith shots, just these pictures where she's just hanging out.
Hanging out and showing. See,
They're so special.
well, thank you so much.
Oh.
I wanted the book to really, I guess, define who she is by showing a realness to her. When the title of the book is based on her own quote, and the quote is, "I'm the lady next door when I'm not on stage." And she was the lady next door. I mean, I would see her grocery shopping. She lived right near me. And I would see her at Kroger.
With
and
an entourage, a bodyguard?
no,
No.
they would be outside.
Outside.
But she would do her own grocery shopping. And in fact, when I was in line at the cashier, and I said, Aretha's in the produce aisle, and the cashier looked at me and said, "She's always here." So it was. You would see her at the Big Boy. She was always at Steve's Deli. In fact, my husband's here saw Aretha at Steve's Deli shortly. Well, not shortly, but about within the year before she passed away. So she could live an authentic life here in Detroit, and that was so special. If you ever go to Memphis, everyone has an Elvis story. For those of us in Detroit, just as you have shared yours, Martin, everybody has an Aretha story. And since this book has been published, everyone has told me, "Well, we saw her here. She did this. She did that." And everyone has these fun stories. That would be a very interesting book too. Having Detroiters share their own Aretha stories about her, just as you've shared yours. So, the book, is really, it shows Aretha on stage, and of course, but I wanted to show the intimate photos of her with her family. I wanted to show her, having fun. And she was fun. She had the wildest sense of humor. And in fact, she would call me sometimes at night, and we would just yak. And when she'd leave a voicemail, and I saved them because she'd always leave her last name, which is kind of funny, right? Right. She would say, "Linda, it's Aretha Franklin." I'm thinking, well, duh.
So
I would like you to share your stories, and you come up with us. So, she did some really sweet, wonderful, charming things that I'm forever grateful to be able to share with you.
So some guy named Burt Bacharach did the foreword here.
Yes.
A legendary songwriter. Oh, how did that come about?
Well, I Say a Little Prayer is one of Aretha's best, and in our career we can be honest with each other and say there are a few stars that we've gotten to know as friends, and so I do know Burt Bacharach. Also, I'm very blessed to have known him. I mean, it started out, certainly I was a huge fan, but then through my work I've gotten to know him, and I did send him an email, and I said, "I'm doing a book about Aretha, and I'd love for you to write the foreword." And he did. Burt is now 91, still in concert. He's pretty amazing. Like Tony Bennett, who's 93. They're amazing, still performing. And like Aretha, they're always creating and learning. I mean, Aretha was always learning. In fact, when we did our DIA launch, and Ed and Elena Snyder were there, and they can tell you, Aretha's opera coach was on stage, and she said that Aretha was studying and learning up until, her last days of her life. I mean, she was continuing to learn, and I think that's an important lesson for all of us. And, that you never should stop learning and studying. And Tony Bennett, he will talk about that too. Like he once said, I think you'll appreciate this, he said that he read an article about Streisand, and she was like flaunting the fact that she never sings unless she has to. And he said that he didn't agree with that. He said, this is your voice, and you need to always sing, not just, when you're paid to do it, but, so he, that's why Tony Bennett has had the great longevity that he has. But Aretha, constantly was singing. And even there's a section in the book where she was a ballerina, which was really fun. And she studied ballet too. She was always studying French and would kind of sprinkle her conversation in with a bit of French.
Mm-hmm.
And so she's fascinating in so many different ways, So.
I believe it's Burt Bacharach who's quoted in here as mentioning how he was shocked and stunned and so impressed how gifted Aretha was, not only vocally but on piano.
Yes.
And Aretha didn't read music.
No.
This was
no.
all.
Yeah, he
Intuitive.
referred to her as one of the greatest pianists, and that was so amazing. And that's why I ended the book with an emotional photograph of Aretha at the piano, sort of in silhouette. Because I started the book with a photo of her at the piano, which was my first photo of her. And then I ended, not with the last photo I've taken of her, but of her at the piano. I felt that it was a natural ending to the book. I mean, it was a very hard book to do emotionally because, how can we ever experience someone like Aretha again? Berry Gordy, I thought, said it in the most profound way. He said some stars come along once every decade, some stars come along just once. And that's Aretha Franklin. So for me, to have had all these opportunities to capture her, it was just emotional to do the book and to think, I'll never have an experience like this again with anyone else, because who could be Aretha Franklin? And then the sadness of, when you look back at work, and I realized that even though she had this incredible success, she had a lot of personal sadness. When I look back at my photos of her brother Cecil, who died at 49 years old, and he was her right arm. I mean, he was her manager and did everything for her. And her sister Carolyn, who was her background singer, who died at 43. And then Irma, her oldest sister, who died in her early 60s. So she lost, her family at such young ages, and they were so close. So the sadness that she endured, along with this incredible success, it's just, so it made me, going back, and then I was the photographer at the memorial, and that was so difficult for me.
Did you know she was ill? Did you talk to her at all
Well,
when she was ill?
Now that's an interesting question. I did.
You did.
And
Because this was such a mystery for the general.
It was a mystery,
public.
and I felt, and my husband he'll agree, with what I'm saying, because I often said to him, "What do I do? Do I call her? Do I send flowers?" And then I would say to myself, "No." Now I know that seems really insensitive, but for someone like Aretha, who was so protective of her privacy, I thought, even though we go way back, I'm still a journalist, and she knows that.
Yes.
So if I send her flowers, she'll think, okay, Linda knows, and I don't want anyone knowing. And even though she would trust me, and of course I would never do anything to hurt her, but I didn't call her during those years because I thought the one thing that she would want most of all is privacy. So no, I never called her. And then I had read, and you probably know this, that she didn't even tell Clive Davis that she had cancer, who was her dearest friend. So people knew she
Clive
was
Davis,
ill.
head of Arista.
Head of Arista, but
record.
she looked, there were photos of her that were published that were quite heartbreaking for me.
Last couple of live appearances.
Yes.
Yeah,
well, when Smokey Robinson came to Detroit, I saw a photo of Aretha on Facebook, and I am telling you, I started to cry. First of all, I couldn't bear to see her look that ill. And I thought, how could someone post that photograph? I mean, she looked terrible. And it was just heartbreaking to see her. And and I couldn't, having the opportunity to know her, and it was heartbreaking. So
Were you there for her final appearance in Detroit when she performed outside the music hall?
no, I was not. I was
Me
out of
either.
town for that. There were certain things that I had to. And that was hard for me when, there were times when I was working on my project Pictures of Hope. Ed Snyder worked with me on that, where I had to actually turn down some opportunities with Aretha. But I saved the voicemails where she said, "Linda, come to New York. I'm doing this," and I couldn't go because I was working on my program for children. But, I would explain it, but I don't know if it made sense to turn down Aretha Franklin. But uh, I couldn't. Some of the things, I couldn't go to, but I feel that was what was supposed to happen.
Talk about your nonprofit. Forgive me, we should have talked about this earlier.
Well,
Pictures
Ed
of Hope.
Snyder
When
worked
did
with me
this-
on Pictures of Hope.
Yeah, when
and-
did this get started? What's this all about?
Well, I started working on Pictures of Hope in 2005, and it was something that I think I was destined to do because I love photography and I love sharing what I know. I don't believe in keeping secrets, so and I'm a very non-technical photographer, so it's very easy for me to teach because I teach in a very simple way. So for me to teach children is very easy because I explain it more from the heart rather than the technical parts of photography.
Okay.
So, I started working with kids and I realized that for children that are going through some very tough times, children that are homeless in America, sadly, I mean, the numbers are shocking. There are 2.5 million children that are homeless in America. The average age of someone homeless in America is 7 years old. There aren't a lot of companies helping homeless children, sadly. I mean, just devoted to helping children living in shelters. And I was very blessed to be able to work with General Motors and to be able to bring Pictures of Hope to 52 cities for a number of years. I'm still doing it as a nonprofit, but it's given me, tremendous joy to be able to share what I love and to see kids have a different life as a result of one photograph. I mean, we met a child in 2006 who was homeless, whose dream was for a scholarship. And when the Alumni Association for San Diego State happened to see her Pictures of Hope card, we create cards with the children's photographs, they granted her a full tuition scholarship at 9 years old.
Goodness.
And her family, at that time her father was in jail, her mother lost everything, was living in the Door of Hope, and they had never had the opportunity, her parents, to attend college. So for their daughter to receive a full tuition scholarship at 9, it was a life-changing event, not just for their daughter, but for the parents. They're now ministers with the Salvation Army, and they do credit Pictures of Hope with changing their lives. Their daughter is now getting her master's, and
Goodness.
we're still helping her. We gave her a grant to help pay off her student loans for her master's, her tuition, her college. Her undergrad was certainly paid for, but now we're still helping her. She's a very dear friend of mine. And we keep our friendships. The kids are mentored. The mentors keep in touch with the kids. The kids, my husband will tell you, they call me, they have my cell phone, they're on my Facebook, their mothers, and it's been amazing to see how their lives have changed. And if you can change one life, you've changed the world. So it's a very personal project because we don't work with thousands of kids, but the kids that we meet become our friends. And we really try to help them in every way we can. And they deserve it. They deserve to know their dreams matter. Their mothers are working. They can't make ends meet. There are so many misconceptions about the homeless. I could talk about it for hours. What I've seen, what I've witnessed, what I've heard, what kids have shared. I mean, can you imagine when you give a child a camera and you ask that child to share what he or she is dreaming about, and you look at the written list and it says, "I dream to see my mother smile again. I dream to have people not look down upon me. I dream to have my own bed. I dream for food." This is America. This is not fair. So what I've seen, I come back and I'm always depressed and thinking, how can I do more? But we've been able to grant more scholarships. This amazing president of a very small college happened to see a news report about Pictures of Hope and emailed me and said, I'm so touched by these kids who are homeless that dream to go to college. I want to grant full tuition scholarships. So we've been granting the Dream Scholarship, which is a $100,000 scholarship. We've granted it to 5 homeless youth, first generation, and they're all doing well. They're all at Blackburn College in Illinois. It's a very small college. And now the president of Blackburn moved to Otterbein University, the school that was just featured on the Democratic debate. So now we're granting scholarships there, and that is a $170,000 scholarship, completely paid for by the university to homeless youth.
That's beautiful. That really is really.
But
it's
Ed Snyder
extraordinary.
was, a supporter, and it's the kind of project where I can't do it all alone. I wish I could, but we give the kids digital cameras, we print cards. So the cards that we print, 100% of the proceeds go back to the shelters. But it's more than just a card. It's creating the awareness, because when the media features these photographs, that's when the lives are changed.
Oh, right, yeah. Oh, that is so incredible. Let's get back to your book and get
Sure.
back to you. I'm staring at this photo. How many times do you think you saw her perform live? Do you have any idea how many concerts that you attended?
Well, the concerts, it's interesting. I think she once did, I don't know if any of you were there, but she did a 3-night SRO at the Premier Center that was so amazing.
Which is in the book here.
Yeah, and because the Premier Center was a very small venue compared to places like she
Certainly
would
has.
normally perform, and I mean Sinatra performed there, the biggest stars performed there, but it was not a very big venue. Probably had 1,000 seats, if that, maybe not even 1,000. But to see Aretha there was amazing, and she was with her sisters and Brenda, and she often said that was the best time of her life, performing with her sisters Irma and Carolyn and her cousin Brenda. She loved it, and it was so personal, and they were always backstage. So, I just, all the concerts were fabulous, but I think the one that stands out for me was when she performed the one and only concert with the Godfather of Soul. And
James
that
Brown.
would turn out to be an iconic concert, because James Brown was doing a television special and he wanted Aretha. And the producer said, we want Aretha, and Robert Palmer is going to be on the special, Wilson Pickett, Joe Cocker, Billy Vera, and we want Aretha. And she said, no, it's going to have to be in Detroit. Even though it was the Godfather of Soul's special, if they wanted Aretha, they would film it in Detroit, which they had to do, and it was at Club Taboo, which is no longer there anymore, down on the riverfront. But she said, Linda, I want you to come to the rehearsal. So I was the only photographer at the rehearsal, and she was wearing sneakers, what everybody's wearing today, with red leather jeans. She had no makeup on. She never asked for photo approval, ever.
Oh, I'm glad
Never.
you mentioned that. Wow, really?
Never. And she just let me do my thing there. There was an AP photographer shooting the actual concert. I was there for the concert too, but I knew there was another photographer, so it didn't. It was interesting to me, but I really wanted the rehearsal when nobody, would be there, because she had her script in her hand and she was having fun with him. But he was nervous to watch James Brown meet Aretha.
James Brown.
He was nervous. He was all dolled out. I mean, if you see how he looked. He had on the racing gloves and the big sunglasses and the ascot. And here, Aretha, no makeup, sneakers. She was very relaxed with him, but he was nervous. And it was fun to watch. And then after, I had calls from everyone, from Rolling Stone, from Billboard. We want those photos. And I said no. Because I told, when Aretha called me, she knew I would be shooting it for the Detroit News. And that's who I shot it for. I never sold the photos to anybody else, and I just maintained the relationship we had. She granted a lot of television interviews with me. I have very lengthy television interviews with Aretha. In fact, we aired a little snippet of one at the DIA, but so I was kind of juggling, because I was doing my column, but I was also interviewing her when I worked for Channel 2. So we'd have a television crew there, and I kept all the raw tape, which is the unedited tape, so it has, the clarity that you wouldn't think it was shot 40 years ago. It really looks like it was just shot because I have the original tape of her. And she was, as I said, I mean, she was wonderful to me. One of the nicest things that happened for me was when Sabrina said that she would write the afterword to the book. Sabrina is Aretha's niece, Irma's daughter, and the representative of the estate. And she was the first one to see the finished book. And she never asked to see the galley, much like her aunt. She just trusted me that, it would be what, she would like. And so she sent me an email, and in caps, she said, "Linda, this is awesome." And she said, "I truly believe Aretha would have loved this book." And that meant a lot to me. And everything about it, I gave it a lot of thought. Working with Wayne State, I felt that was the right publisher.
Yeah, makes
Because
sense.
published in Detroit, it's a nonprofit publisher. It's they're very thoughtful and caring, and if you work with one of the big New York publishers, I don't think they would have given it the sensitivity. And we don't have a big budget for anything, but we're all very devoted to the book, and we want to share her legacy with younger generations, because in today's world, you only see Beyonce and J-Lo and the hip stars. So this is just one way to share her legacy. There will be, the film is coming out, and there's a docudrama and so forth. But we need to, always share her legacy so that she'll never be forgotten. And so the word respect, we have to always respect her in a variety of ways. So whether it's performing her music, or writing a book, or talking about her on radio, or sharing stories, we need to keep doing that, because we're living in a different world today.
Yeah.
And only the hip stars, the young generations, are aware of. So, the hip current stars. So that's very important to me.
What does the future hold for Linda Solomon now that you've got this incredible book on Aretha out? What does the rest of this year in 2020 look like for you?
Oh, well, thank you. Well, I'm always, as I said, kind of thinking of other ways to respect her. Yeah. So I really would like to do something even bigger in our city. I've been kind of sharing my idea to take the letters of respect and create something as large as the Hollywood sign, but on the letters have photographs and words captured by Detroit children, and have them share what respect means. Who do you respect? What needs to be respected? And take these images and words and put them on these huge letters, maybe made out of auto material, and have people walk through them, walk under them, but to see what the true meaning of respect is. And I think that, without respect, what do you have? So I think that would be something that would inspire people to realize what she meant to Detroit, and it would encourage others to just have respect. And so that's my idea. So that's what I'd like to work on next for Aretha.
I could just see that at the foot of Woodward overlooking the
These
Detroit
huge
River there.
letters of respect. It's an art installation, but it's more of a movement. I refer to it as the Respect Detroit Project, but in honor of Aretha Franklin.
Let's have a round of applause for our guest, Linda Solomon.
Thank you.
Her book,
Thank you.
The Queen
Thank
Next Door, Aretha Franklin, an
Thank you,
intimate
Mark.
portrait. Copies for sale. Linda would love to meet you and sign
Thank
a
you.
copy for the book. Thanks for coming,
Yes.
Linda.
This program was recorded on November 8th, 2019, at the Ann Arbor District Library.